Okay, so I have a few questions I wanted to ask you following this one. So first one, I think I'll start with you, Alex. I think it's easy in the context of where we are right now to be alarming. Everyone kind of sees that. So what do you think the people here should do? So you're in this space, there are a lot of people here who have the power or the interest and so on. What is the call for action from the people here? You understand?
I think if we look back to things like SARS, and we look back to avian influenza, we think about previous coronaviruses, we have this problem of forgetting. We just forget about pandemics. We all want to go past it. No one in here, as far as I can tell, is wearing a mask, right? Thank you. Just like, well done. But like most of us have forgotten. And we can't afford to do that given the rate of emergence, the amount of emergence, the amount of things we're doing to put ourselves in harm's way. And I think that just fundamentally is like we as a planet need to actually think about it. I think the second is we've got to make changes in our lifestyles, and we need products that actually allow us to make those changes more easily that don't undermine our health and our ecosystem health.
Okay. So next to you, I want to ask you, you work in the government right now. And from the outside, if we look at it, it seems like the government itself has a lot of gaps and differences politically and so on. How do you navigate that? Like when, is everyone in agreement, or do you have to convince people that there are problems that everyone thinks there are, but you are not sure about? How does it work government-wise?
Yeah. So when we go to war, hasn't happened in a long time, but it's like there's the Department of Defense, there's the President, and the National Security Advisor. You know that you know what that structure is. Who's in charge of the pandemic? There's lots of people that are in charge because it touches on a lot of different places, but there's no single individual that's really in charge. And so that makes it really challenging. Recently, I was just rereading Atul Gawande's book, the Checklist Manifesto. It's a really great book. You should take a look. You should take a read. One of the things that in that book he shows this, like a child fell through the ice, was down there for 30 minutes. They were actually able to recover her after two hours of being technically dead. They had to do multiple things in synchrony to actually do that. Now that doesn't work every time, so there's extreme complexity associated with that. And they were able to actually think through how to actually make that a higher probability activity. Same with pandemic response. It's an extremely complex issue. No one individual really knows how to actually drive and manage a full outbreak. You need a group of people and a group of different organizations. And that extreme complexity brings lots of challenges of how do you organize as a society, how do you organize as a government to bring it all together. Now, I do think that there's some advances that are happening right now to actually make this more effective, but there's a lot of work to go forward in making it better going.
So Alex said we need to remember and we need to have technology. You say we need to have basically a system that works together and so on. But my curious follow-up on that is, do you have in your sphere people who totally disagree with you? Like you say we need to do this and they say no, we don't need masks. Or because politically we see that there are those concessions in the public, need masks, not need masks. Does it come from China or not? Like those concessions out there, is your team suffering from the same problems?
Yeah, no, I mean, as Colin pointed out as well, it's like, it's challenging to work with humans. Humans are pesky. Everyone, they have their own, it's as if they don't have their own brain. Jesting aside, it's the divided kind of environment that we're going into from a societal perspective is going to be really challenging, and there's no doubt about it. And trying to prior to COVID, biodefense was seen as a bipartisan issue. It was seen as something that we all kind of bound together to try to think through. Now it's seen much more as a partisan issue. I'm concerned about what that will portend for activities going forward.
All right, to you, Colin. So you're the scientist who have the data that you showed us looks nicely how we got here. Make predictions. When is the next pandemic?
Oh, that's not my job. So here's what I'm going to say, right? More often than not, we keep finding ourselves facing familiar threats, right? And to go back to what Dylan was saying, right now, every single threat that we are juggling worldwide is a familiar one. right? We've been dealing with COVID for a while. COVID is unfamiliar, but we were dealing with SARS 20 years ago. We're in a global monkeypox outbreak. No, we haven't had a global monkeypox outbreak like this before, but we have been looking at monkeypox for decades. We have polio in New York, we have Ebola in Uganda. So the safe answer to that question is always, it's not actually going to be something new, right? And this is where I get to get creative and say, well, you know, we have to focus on the familiar threats. But really, I think what we are seeing is an erosion of the basic capacities and systems that kept those things at bay. And to your point about partisanship, right? The further we go down that road, the more we will be dealing with those familiar threats. So what I'll say is there are viruses that we worry about, there are weird outbreaks that we're keeping an eye on, but it's all of it.
So I'm going to ask a different question that will be less kind of about the future, and it's more concrete. What type of data do you need? So if there are people here who run companies, they have access to all the tools, what type of data, if you had, or tools that if you had, you would make better predictions that you can kind of launch out there and people might be able to get them for you?
I love this question because it gets the one thing I couldn't fit into the talk out. The biggest problem that we have in the space that I work in is that people think that spillover is unpredictable. There is one exception to that. We see more spillover of animal pathogens into human populations when prevalence is higher in nature, right? And this goes back to all those conservation connections, right? Sometimes it's not that conservation directly affects our health. Sometimes it's that 5 or 6 steps upstream we're affecting animal health. But here's the trick to it. If we got really good at monitoring animal health, if we built that weather system on the other side of the interface, then maybe we could predict spillover, and we're building it. It's called Pharos. It's launching sometime this winter. I don't have an exact date, but our idea is, what if we took all of the billions of records of wildlife disease surveillance we have worldwide and we shared them? Because right now we don't. We share outbreak data, but everything that scientists are building careers on, it's actually much harder to get us to share, right? We don't want to let go of our 100 points of canine distemper data from wolves or whatever we have in our pocket.
Here, scientists are the problem.
Scientists are the problem. I'll own it, right? And part of what we've done with our organization is we've tried to model it, right? We say, okay, can we start sharing all of our data on this server first? And can we figure out how to get the credit that we deserve? Can we figure out how to incentivize that data sharing? And if we do that, and this is my gamble to all of you, I think if we can get 1 trillion data points on that server by 2030, I think we can start to predict spillover in real time. That is my gamble.
So Alex, my last question is to you. This session, not by random choice, was kind of placed immediately after the session about the kind of climate. In a way, this is the bridge. So I'm curious if you could take the previous session and this session and kind of tell me what is the connection that you see between climate science and those pandemics, and if so, how do you want to talk to climate scientists and have them work with you to essentially bridge the 2 dimensions, pandemics and climate?
Well, Colin is a climate scientist, so he is working. I think he is an example of that bridge that is out there. I mean, there's kind of 2 perspectives on this. I mean, one is just our failure in some ways with COVID, right, is a lesson for how we got to think about solving our potential failure for climate. We can't have that level of failure with climate in terms of what we're doing. So we definitely need to learn from the good and the bad of what happened with COVID. I think the second thing is, we need all in. We need the food systems people. We need we need to think about pathogens in livestock and in plants and fungal pathogens. And we need to think about the global health folks working together with the conservation folks and with the climate folks within what they're doing. We do need that, because one of the things that's also happening is 95% of the ecological communities are also reforming, right? So we're in the middle of change, and for too long we've thought about conservation as going backwards in time, but evolution moves forward. And so we need to actually understand where are those places that's going, where is that risk highest, what have we learned, and how do we then predict those things and understand both of them, because it's a benefit to human health and it's a benefit to our planet. Those are the ways that we win.
Here's my last one. How did the 3 of you meet? How did you get together? How did
It's Alex. It's all his fault.
These guys are rock stars. That is, and I was like, how do I hang out with them? And I was like, PopTech. That's how we all hang out. So that was why.
I hope this exchange is going to continue and you're going to keep telling us what's happening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.